let's see here.
What did we jump ahead of or forget?
I think I was going to get into Losi Minis specific stuff a little bit, but I think we got most of it. Steering. So I learned this the hard way. The Losi Mini Bs and Mini Ts, when you have the aluminum steering in there, the option steering, whether you got the Pro Roller or if you just buy it optionally, it's not a good setup in my opinion, right? Todd Hodge would be after me on that. Todd Hodge is a Losi employee that used to race me since then. But the little shoulder screws, right, that go into the drag link. Everybody know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly.
It binds. I ripped that aluminum piece out and shoved a plastic drag link right back in.
Solution.
But I kept the metal bell cranks because because those break if you look at them funny.
Yeah. So that's a great solution. I think that's what you did.
We've been telling everybody to do. Yeah.
Even with Loctite, you hit a couple of bumps and they drive themselves in. Even with
they can. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I even chucked some red Loctite in there for grins, and it still did
it. Yeah.
You can Loctite, and my mod car still has the aluminum link and all the aluminum stuff in it.
Yeah.
But you have to Loctite it and let it sit overnight,
Yep.
and don't touch it and have it set right. Because as soon as you readjust it, you break Loctite and it moves again. So.
Right, so that's a great solution is the plastic bar, right? That's what Tony's been telling people, and that's a good solution. Because I'm hard-headed, I've got the aluminum link in there still, but I did the same thing, right?
I don't think that plastic drag link will break under any of the forces that we will see in this kind of racing.
Yeah,
I've seen it happen. Unfortunately, we had somebody prove us wrong.
Did you do it?
So no, I did not do it. We had a guy out here break one, and I said, I told him, I was like, this is the first one of these I've ever seen broken. So, and I still don't know how he did it, but I honestly
it's a
think,
1 in a million.
I think it was a defect in the casting because there was like a bubble in the part where it broke. So,
could have been.
Because like I said, the easy solution is put the plastic drag link in it, aluminum bell cranks, and it's done. You don't have to mess with it again. So, the other options are, you can Loctite it, but it's Loctite it the night before and don't touch it till everything is cured for 24 hours, basically.
And that's what I do on my stock car. My car, I've got the hot racing.
Right. And then the other option is the hot racing one. The hot racing one, in place of the shoulder screws, has little brass bushings. So you can crank down those brass bushings and it doesn't bind up on the bell crank. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. The only thing I've noticed with the hot racing one, the parts are a little bit thicker, so you lose a little tiny bit of steering lock. But we've got more steering than these cars need anyhow. So
lots of solutions to the same problem.
Right.
You do what works for you, right? But I guess the key is you want smooth steering that doesn't have any notchiness and you're binding up on it. All right. Camber, caster, and toe. All right, just so we're all on the same page. Camber is, if you look at your tires straight on, that's how much the tops are leaned in or out. All right. Toe is if you're looking straight down, how much the front of the tires are leaned
pointed
in
or
toe in or toe
pigeon
out.
toed or basically
Right? Yeah. Right. That. And caster is.
Caster on these cars is not easily adjustable, so it's not
but just for reference.
Yeah.
You can see how the shocks and everything are.
Basically, how the kingpin is angled back, lean back. So,
like Tony said, not easily adjustable on these cars, so I'm not going to worry about that part of it. Camber and toe, though, are easily adjustable, and they play a big part in how the car drives. Best place to start, I think, is 0. So when I say 0 camber, that's straight up and down tires, front and back. And I think 0 toe, straight ahead.
0 toe, straight ahead, 0 camber, and no fancy tools or anything required. Yep. The simplest thing to set camber is a shock oil bottle and a wrench.
Yeah. Or I use, which is totally high tech, if I can find it. Where did I put it? I've just got a piece of plastic.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, there's camber gauges.
You just need a reference 90 degrees, basically.
Dustin, I'm going to use your truck as reference here.
Yeah.
I don't have tires on any of my cars right now. Did you set your camber recently?
Nope. Okay.
We'll see here.
Perfect example.
All right. So, actually, let me find my other piece of plastic that I like Tony said, it's just a reference point.
Right.
So you could get.
Like I said, when usually you have a bottle of shock oil laying around, that's a simple 90 degrees.
You have.
Yeah.
Perfect. So you're looking the gap between the top of the tire and the bottom of the tire. You can see there's a gap up here, right? So that means this truck has negative cam. Negative is always in towards the truck or the car.
Shows it better when you have a opaque background.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, yeah, camera gauge. Right? Yeah. You can use these. They work great if you want to know exactly where you're at. Eyeballing it, though, you get used to it.
Yeah.
You kind of know whether I have 1 or 2 degrees.
Now the one thing, if you're really cool, these guys will have basically a setup board, or literally it's anything that's flat in the size of the car that you can set the car on. You've got a nice flat surface, so you can set you got a reference point basically. Because our pit tables are not the smoothest and most perfect in the world, and even using the rubber mats and stuff like that, it's a soft surface. Things can change and move. So
you get a little bit of error in there.
A simple common thing is get yourself a nice cutting board. It's great for these.
You know what I usually do? I usually come up to the counter.
Yeah.
And I take a
or there's a nice
space.
glass setup table right here. So.
The takeaway though here is that, right, so negative camber is in, positive camber is out. I can't think of any instance where we run positive camber, because it makes the car want to do weird, funky things.
It gets really edgy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So either, as Dustin's got here, he's got a couple degrees of negative camber on the front, right? That's good. Or you can run straight up and down. He's got a little bit more in the rear. Later on, we could talk about what camber does to it, how a car handles. But the big point here is that you want everything the same, right? And closest to straight up and down you can get it. That's going to give you a good start.
Prime example was Friday. My car was crap the first heat. It was bad. And
First heat?
Huh?
The first heat?
Yes.
Oh,
And smarty. Literally came back and was like, wait a minute, I've got like 4 or 5 degrees tow out, camber's all weird. It literally sat down in 2 minutes, set camber and tow, and it was a different car to drive the next heat. So
How do you adjust that?
I'll put it back. All right.
with the stock ones, the easy answer is a 1.5 wrench fits in the hole in the toe link.
Yeah, the Allen, they have a hole in them for the Allen wrench.
Yeah.
The GRXs do not.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. They don't do
The
that.
GRX, you need a
GRXs
little.
You need a little wrench.
GRXs are pretty obnoxious to adjust.
And they just have a spinny thing.
Yep. So, so you can either use a little 1.5 wrench, or this is what is this? 5/32. Yeah.
5/32 or 4mm.
Yep.
Or if you want to get fancy, Losi and Energy and a bunch of people make turnbuckle wrenches.
Yeah.
So, but it's just a tool is a nice thing to have. But like I said, with the GRX2, you pretty much have to have an open-end wrench or the turnbuckle wrench to do it. So just don't take a pair of pliers to it.
Oh yeah.
It sounds kind of anal, I guess, but basically where you scratch those is where they're going to break. When you take a pair of pliers and gnaw on them and chew them up, that actually damages the surface of the metal and they will break there. So
It looks terrible too.
and it looks like crap.
So the way to adjust these, right, it's either turn them one way or another. And I literally every time forget which way to turn to get it to go shorter or longer. Don't tell me, because I'm not going to remember.
No. Basically, that said, if you're ever, and the cars come built this way, but if you're ever replacing links in the car, ever doing repairs in the car, rebuilding the car, that is one thing to pay attention to. Make sure all your links are on the car the same way. So everyone.
Don't look at my car.
So I typically do them set up so that pulling back shortens it, pushing forward lengthens it. If you take a little extra time when you're building the car to do that, you don't have to think about it when you're in a hurry. Oh gosh, I need to change camber real quick. And so if you make it a rule of thumb on all your cars that you always do it the same way, then you don't have to think that how does this go, and you go, oh crap, it's going the wrong way. Got to go the other way now and back, and you get out of your
Got a better
position.
memory than I do apparently. Because I'll still do it the wrong way.
When you're working on a car, building a car, that is one thing that will make your life so much easier. Is stuff like that. Make it so every camber link is the same way in the car. So that every one, say pull it back makes it shorter. Push it forward, rotate it forward, makes it longer. So
As much as he is right. He is absolutely right. Yes, if you go for consistency, it does help. Me, I still forget. So what I do is I look at the way the threads are going. And if you look real close, you can see the threads on this one are pointing like this, right? So it's just like any other thread, right? Turn it that way, it's going to shorten, right? Because your threads are pointing this way, and they're going to dig in
just
to the ball length.
a turnbuckle has left and right threads on it, so that you spin it, it gets shorter and gets longer. That's the whole point.
I'm gonna totally mess up your camera here, right? So I'm gonna shorten this one up a lot. Y'all remember about how that looked before, right? So, right. See how much more camera that's got now.
Right. So, yeah, starting point, like we said, is 0 to 1 degree negative all the way around, and 0 to. That's where you start. The car should be easiest to drive at that point.
The main reason here is so you're not fighting the car, and the car's going straight, and it's not doing odd things when you turn left or turn right.
Now, get the camera right. The next thing you get to is the toe end.
Oh yeah.
And there's one thing to pay attention to in toe end.
Right. So toe in, toe out, and again, just don't worry about the slop.
Right.
It's not gonna
Always eyeball your lengths so that they are the same length either side. So if you do it to one side, do it to the other side. Never adjust just one side when setting toe. Basically what happens is if you get one link really long, one link really short, but the toe's straight, that means your steering ball cranks are here, which means the Ackerman, which is more technical stuff, but it's going to be really weird, and the car's not going to steer the same each direction. So that is a big thing. Even endpoints are going to change because the steering ball cranks do have a physical stop. They only go so far. And at the extreme of things, if you had this one really long and this one really short, you're going to lose steering to the short side because the bell cranks are already turned halfway there. So
we'll talk about endpoint.
Yeah.
When he said endpoint, that's endpoint adjustment or EPA.
Right.
We'll talk a little bit about
but
that here in just a minute.
the biggest thing when adjusting the steering is make sure that they are even on both sides.
A trick that I use when I'm adjusting camber and toe and everything is I go usually in like quarter turn increments, right? So I'll turn the turnbuckle a quarter turn, and then I'll go do the same thing on the other one, and I'll kind of sneak up on the setting that I want to be at. And that way, they're always mostly equal.
Basically, the idea if you're building a car from scratch or building a new car, or have to replace tie rods on the car, or want to you upgrade to titanium turnbuckles or whatever, when you build it, say there's 2 steering links. Build the 2 steering links, set them on the bench, and measure the gap between the inside. And don't even care what it is. Just make sure it's the same on both of them. So then, when you go to adjust, just make the same adjustment on both sides, and they'll stay consistent throughout the whole thing.
All right, toe. Toe's a little trickier, right? Because it's tough to get a reference point. So that's why I'm getting out my calipers here. But you could use a ruler, anything with measurement markers.
It depends on how calibrated your eyes are.
That too.
It really
right?
is. I mean, I have a knack for this. I can look at a car and tell you it's got 1 degree, 2 degrees toe in or toe out without actually measuring anything.
You just get used to it.
It comes down to just experience with the car. But what like he's gonna do, you can measure front and back of the tire and see the difference in the.
So again, toe in is when
The front's closer than the back.
toe outs.
Yeah.
Like that. I feel like that was a dance.
Yeah, no, we're not doing the safety dance or whatever.
It looks like I'm going to say Dustin's got a little bit of toe in here, and when you're looking at toe, it's important that you don't look at it like this, right? You
You got to look square down on it.
square down, right? So don't look at it at the same angle as the front shocks are. Look straight down. And if everybody maybe just come up here and look real quick. I think Dustin's got a little bit of toe in.
About a degree in.
Yeah. We'll check and be sure.
Yeah.
See how accurate you were, Dustin. But Dustin, by the way, Dustin here, he's one of the old school guys also. He used to race with us back in the 90s and early 2000s. So.
anyhow. Again, toe is something to start at 0, basically. You can use toe in and toe out to tune the handling of the car, to change how it enters corners and stuff. But again, 0 is where to start. That's where you want to learn the car, and then go from there.
So if you've got, especially if you've got uneven toe, right, the car's going to track one way or another, and you're just going to fight it the entire time.
Right.
And so you constantly have to be making adjustments with the wheel, which is pretty much
Right.
impossible to drive that way.
And it's back to making sure the links are the same length on either side when you do it. And then you get mechanically the car towed right, then you adjust electronically to get your steering trimmed so the car goes straight. So
I've got 118.74 millimeters. Let's see what we are on the back. I'll try to do as close as I can here. It's not a perfect
I'll
thing.
give it 119.5.
That's pretty good, Skip. 119.4. Did you measure this before? I feel like yeah, but those would be obviously equal, right? If you've got 0 toe. A little bit of toe in is fine, right? And we can talk later about what toe, like Tony said, toe does. But the thing is, take away.
Another simple way to visualize toe. Basically, take a straight edge down the tire. Some of the on-road guys will do this. They measure toe by putting a straight edge on the tire and measuring where it ends up on the rear tire.
Yep.
So, in theory, put the straight edge. And problem is these cars are so sloppy in steering that it's kind of hard to hold everything in place. You can't. It's more eyeball and get a feel for it. You're never going to get everything perfect on these.
So a tip on that I have is to get kind of a nominal position of the suspension, right? Because Tony's right, they are sloppy, right? So if you turn it one way a little bit, yeah.
I mean, just doing that, just holding this. I mean, you can move 3 to 4 degrees in the slop, and honestly, there's nothing you can do about that. It's just it is what it is, and kind of learn to live with it. So,
what I do is when I set these is I always do this to try to get the car to kind of land where it would naturally
when
sit
it's
on
natural,
the
yeah.
track. Right, and then I go about and do my measurements. Now, talking about toe, anybody notice on the rear end?
This is a big thing.
It's like 4 degrees.
Every day,
Yep.
somebody buys a new RC car and comes back. The rear end's broken. The tires are pointing toward each other. It's like, no, they're supposed to be that way.
They're supposed to be that way. So if you had, on these cars, if you had 0 toe on the back, right? Straight, totally straight, the rear end would be all over the place, right? When you get on the throttle, it'd want to, well, maybe not so much here, but
The
on
carpet
dirt,
is, a lot of the guys in 10 scale are going to a lot less toe. They're still running some toe. Normal setup on an off-road car in dirt is 3 degrees toe. 3 degrees per side, basically. The carpet guys, when you're on such a high bite surface, the toe end is basically the tires are both driving toward the center of the car. The idea of the toe end is, and
Squares
Guevara
the
does
car
this
up.
car. The simplest way to explain it, that I can explain it that people get, is basically rear toe, going down the road, everything's straight, everything's fine. The car starts to slide or turn or anything, it turns left. Well, as it turns left, the weight transfer goes right. Right rear tire gets more weight on it, which makes it have more traction. That tire being towed in slightly, basically, as it gets more traction, it helps push the back end back in place. So if the car starts to slide, the car starts to roll, this tire gets more grip, this tire gets less grip, because that basically it's rear steer. That rear tire steers the car back into the center until they're evened out.
tries to square the car up.
Right. In a 0 toe car, that's not going to happen. It's just going to, as it starts to slide, it's going to continue to slide, and you're relying solely on the grip of the tire. On a car with toe out, heaven forbid, basically you put weight on that outside tire, and it's not pulling the car even farther away from you.
Well,
So
some of the oval guys run that.
so it makes
Get
it
the car to steer.
it basically makes the car exaggerate the slide, basically.
That's instead of the drift guys use.
No, they actually run rear toe. They're actually getting into variable rear toe stuff now in roll steer, where
More slop in the suspension.
basically the toe end changes as the car rolls. So These cars don't do that. Some of the old cars we ran, the old Schumacher Cat was like that. You could actually set roll steer in the car. Yeah. Yeah, you had basically you had a front suspension on the back of the car, so you had a second toe link, and you could play around with the height and adjustments of that, so that as the car leaned, the tires would steer this way and this way, and it would, if you got it right, it made the car really good. If you got it wrong, you couldn't drive the thing. So because it's always doing this down the road, and wandering, wouldn't track straight. So
on a high bite track like this. And this is just for information, right? 'Cause
Right.
these are not easily changed as far as toe goes, and you don't need
Right.
to worry about it. But high bite tracks, you don't need as much rear toe. But
Right.
on dirt tracks, which we ran on, you needed some toe to get the car to square up and go in a straight line.
Basically, in a dirt car, you're never 100% traction. The car is always stuffing tires, sliding, doing something. It's never perfectly gripped up. Believe it or not, these cars now are, when we first started running, when the carpet was fresh, they were pretty much locked in. They were 100% traction. The carpet is worn in now, and I actually like it because it's like running on dirt now. The car will slide a little bit. You can drift the car a little bit, and it honestly has helped a lot of people that were struggling with traction rolling. Now, as the grip goes away, the cars are a lot easier to drive. Because when we first put this carpet down, and it was brand new and grippy. Oh man, it was hard to get a hold of the car.
Glad you guys wore it in. Because, when Tony touched on it, right, when you're doing toe, you need to make sure you have your steering centered first, right? And that's important for anything. We'll talk about endpoint adjustments and stuff like that later. But when you're starting with toe or setting toe, you got to have your steering centered. What I mean by that is you want this bell crank, this drag link.
Yeah, it doesn't mean the
Right.
trim on your radio is centered. It
Yeah.
means mechanically the car is centered. So.
And you can look at that. And one nice little thing about the Losi cars is they've got that little notch in the chassis right there. That's center of the chassis. So if you center everybody know what I'm talking about?
Where the bumper clips
Yeah.
at the bottom. Yeah. And it's right under the bell crank, so it's easy
Right.
to see.
It's a great reference point. And so what I did is I just measured the drag link and I made a little mark in the center. So every time I go and have to set my toe, I know that is centered, and I line that up with the notch on the chassis, and I know that that's centered. And so you want to start with that,
Right.
You got to have the bell crank centered, because then if you don't, you're going to have weird throws side to side. It's not going to be.
It'll be imbalanced, and it'll be like, why is it turning more left than right?
Yeah.
And so